Every year, the island of Bali hosts the Galungan celebration, a moment when spirits of ancestors are believed to return to visit their families. It's a time of offerings, prayers, and connection between worlds. But what if one of those spirits wasn't supposed to return? This is the story of Edward Malloy, a tourist from England who disappeared without a trace in 2019 while backpacking through Southeast Asia. His last known location? A remote village in the highlands of Bali, Patang. Locals say he stayed the night at an ancient temple, forbidden even to Balinese themselves during the full moon. Since then, every Galungan, villagers claim to hear a man crying for help near that same temple. What truly happened to Edward that night? And why does his soul keep crying out, unable to return home? This is the beginning of a story about one forbidden night. Edward Malloy was an adventurous soul, 27 years old, full of curiosity, and obsessed with ancient cultures. After quitting his job in London, he set out for a 6-month solo journey across Southeast Asia. He posted regularly on Instagram and YouTube, building a modest following as a travel vlogger. In April 2019, he arrived in Bali. He stayed in Ubud for a week before deciding to explore less touristy areas. That's when he heard about the village of Patang. A friend at the guest house told him, "Go there if you want to see real Bali, not the tourist version." So Edward rented a motorbike and set off for Patang. The village welcomed him warmly. He stayed at Pak Nyoman's homestay, an elderly local man who had hosted backpackers before. On the second day, Edward asked about local temples. Pak Nyoman warned him, "There is one temple you must never go to during full moon, Pura Dalam Patang." "Why not?" Edward asked, intrigued. "It's not for outsiders, not even for most Balinese. It's where we used to hold darker rituals before they were banned." Of course, this only made Edward more curious. That night he researched the temple online, but found almost nothing. No photos, no blog posts, no tourist reviews. Just one old Reddit thread that said, "There's a temple in Bali where the veil between worlds is thinnest during full moon. Locals don't go, for a reason." The next day, Edward asked a young local man to point him toward the temple. The man hesitated, then drew a rough map on paper. "Just don't go at night," he said, "and definitely not during full moon." Edward smiled and replied, "Got it." But of course, he went that very night. It was the full moon. He brought a flashlight, his camera, and a sleeping bag. "This will be epic," he said in his last video, uploaded on April 17, 2019. The footage shows him walking through the jungle trail, laughing, making jokes, and commenting on the night sounds. After an hour of hiking, he reached the outer gate of Pura Dalam Patang. The temple was overgrown with moss and vines. Bats flew overhead. The stone carvings had eroded into haunting shapes. "Creepy, but beautiful," he whispered. He climbed over a broken gate and walked inside. In the center of the courtyard, he spread out his sleeping bag. He lit some incense and placed offerings he bought earlier, just to be respectful. Then he lay down, turned off the flashlight, and closed his eyes. That was the last time anyone saw him alive. In the morning, Pak Nyoman noticed Edward hadn't returned. His motorbike was still parked by the road, his room untouched. Pak Nyoman informed the Banjar village council, and a small search party was formed. But no one wanted to go near the temple, not after what happened 15 years ago. In 2004, a young man from the village went there during a full moon and was found catatonic the next day. His mind never recovered. He now wanders the forest, mumbling prayers and warnings. Still, out of respect, a small group went to check. They found Edward's sleeping bag, his phone, his camera, batteries drained, but no Edward. Not even footprints leading out. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. The authorities were contacted. A formal search and rescue was conducted. Drones, dogs, divers, nothing. Not a single trace of Edward Malloy was ever found. Weeks passed. The case made headlines in Bali, then faded. But for the villagers of Patang, the nightmare was just beginning. Because on the next Galungan, 6 months later, Pa Nyoman heard something terrifying. While placing offerings at his family shrine, he heard someone cry, "Help me!" It was a man's voice, a foreign voice. He looked around, no one. But the voice came again. "Help! I'm here!" He followed the sound and it led toward the jungle trail. Then, toward the temple. When he reached the edge of the forest, the voice stopped. He didn't dare go further. The next morning, he spoke to Jero Manku, the village's spiritual leader. Jero Manku paled. "It has begun," he whispered. "The gate has been opened again. And the one who opened it cannot return." 6 months after Edward disappeared, the village of Patang tried to return to normal. But something had changed. People began reporting strange sounds during temple ceremonies. Whispers, pleas, sometimes a scream. But what disturbed them most was the voice. It wasn't speaking Balinese, it spoke in English. A desperate voice calling for help. The villagers knew whose voice it was, and they knew what it meant. The spirit of Edward Malloy had not crossed over. He had become trapped between realms, bound to the very place where he had broken the rules of the unseen. This episode continues the story of the man who couldn't return. After Patnyoman's experience, word spread fast. Many villagers chose to avoid the temple trail completely, even during daylight. But Jero Manku, the spiritual elder, decided it was time to investigate further. He believed Edward's spirit was crying out, not just for help, but for release. With the approval of the Banjar, he organized a small ritual. It was to be held at the edge of the forest, not inside the temple grounds. They didn't want to anger whatever else might be lurking there. The ritual was called Ngulapin, a calling ritual to reach wandering spirits. Offerings were placed, mantras were chanted, and a gamelan softly played. Halfway through the ritual, the wind suddenly changed direction. All the incense blew out. The temperature dropped. Then, a whisper. "Help me!" Jero Manku froze. "Who are you?" he asked in Balinese. Silence. Then a faint reply, in English. Edward." Everyone heard it. Even those who didn't speak English felt a chill run down their spines. One of the youth collapsed, crying uncontrollably. "He's in pain," he sobbed. "So much pain." Jero Manku ended the ritual early. That night he had a dream. In it, he saw Edward standing in the temple courtyard, surrounded by shadows. Hands reached out from the ground, holding his legs. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Only his eyes screamed. When Jero Manku awoke, he made a decision. "We must perform the cleansing," he told the Banjar. But not all agreed. Some believed Edward had broken a sacred law. "Let him suffer," one elder said. "He knew the warnings." "He was not one of us," said another. But others disagreed. "He may not be Balinese, but his spirit is trapped on our land. If we don't help him, the unrest will spread." After much debate, they agreed. A cleansing would be done, but only with the help of a powerful Balian, a spiritual healer from Karangasem. The Balian, a woman named Idgederai, arrived days later. She was in her 60s, dressed in white, with piercing eyes. Upon stepping onto the trail to the temple, she paused. "He is still here," she said, "but he's not alone." The ritual was set for midnight under the next full moon. It had to be done precisely when the veil between realms was thinnest. In the meantime, Edward's old camera was sent to a tech in Denpasar. They managed to retrieve the last 10 minutes of footage. What they found terrified everyone. The video shows Edward lying in his sleeping bag, whispering into his camera. "It's around 2 a.m., he says, eyes half open. "I keep hearing something, like footsteps." He shines his flashlight toward the trees. Nothing. "Probably monkeys," he chuckles nervously. Then, a sound. A loud thud. He sits up quickly. "What the hell was that?" The camera shakes as he walks toward the source of the noise. Then, he freezes. No. "What is that?" he whispers. The camera turns briefly and shows a dark shape, tall, hunched with glowing eyes. It doesn't move, but Edward starts to back away, breathing heavily. Then the chanting starts, a deep, guttural chant echoing across the trees. Not Balinese, not human. Edward runs. The camera shakes violently. Then, darkness. That was the final footage. The Balian was shown the video. She only nodded. "He saw what no living man should see," she said. "He crossed into a place meant only for the dead." On the night of the ritual, the villagers gathered silently at the forest edge. Gaiderai drew sacred symbols on the ground. She burned sulfur and sandalwood. Then she began to chant for hours. At exactly midnight, the wind screamed through the trees. Everyone heard the voice. "Please, let me go!" The Balian shouted, "Name yourself!" The voice replied, "Edward Malloy. I didn't mean to. Please." Then laughter, but not Edward's. Something else. Low, ancient, mocking. The ritual ground shook. Gaiderai's voice grew louder. Her hands moved quickly, forming symbols in the air. "You will not keep him!" she screamed. The laughter turned into a howl. Trees bent backward. Then, silence. One candle remained lit. The Balian slumped forward, breathing heavily. "It is done," she said, "but not complete." "He is no longer in pain," she explained, "but he is not free. Something still holds part of him here. We must find the object that binds him. Something he left behind." The next morning, Pak Nyoman remembered the last offering Edward placed. He had used a small wooden box, something he bought in Ubud as a souvenir. They returned to the temple gate and found it, covered in vines. Inside, a small mirror. Cracked. Gaiderai held it in her hands and closed her eyes. "This is the anchor," she said. He looked into this mirror while the spirit was watching. Part of his soul remained trapped inside. "We must burn it, but only during the next Galungan. Otherwise, the gate will reopen." The villagers agreed. The mirror was sealed and stored in the Pura Desa, village temple, for safekeeping. But some questioned the plan. "What if we burn it and something else comes out?" "Then we will face it," Jaramanku said firmly. "But we cannot let his spirit wander forever." Weeks passed. The village remained calm. No more voices, no more shadows. But every now and then, someone would swear they saw a man walking along the trail. Blonde, pale, staring at the temple gates, waiting. And then, just before Galungan, the mirror went missing. The temple guard found the storage box empty. Panic spread. Jaramanku called Gaiderai immediately. "Without the mirror, he cannot be freed," she warned. "And if someone else takes it to the temple, the gate could open again." No one knows who took it. But on the night of Galungan, Pak Nyoman heard the voice again. This time it wasn't asking for help. It was warning. Don't let them do it again. A new danger was coming, and Edward's spirit was no longer the only one there. The villagers prepared for another ritual, but this time not to free a soul. This time, to stop something from escaping. The veil was thinning once more, and the forest was no longer silent. We've seen how Edward Malloy's presence at Pura Dalimpatang changed everything. The full moon ritual, meant to be sacred, became the beginning of a haunting disaster that loomed over the village of Patang. After the gate to the other world opened, it wasn't just Edward's spirit that appeared, but something far more sinister, a primeval entity that had been sealed away for centuries. In this final episode, we'll follow Pak Nyoman in Jaramanku's last attempt to close that gate. They are racing against time, because the third Galungan is near, and if the prophecy is true, Edward's body will become a permanent vessel of darkness. The question is, can they save his soul and rescue the village from destruction? Or will they all become sacrifices in a ritual they never fully understood? This is the final tale, about sacrifice and a spirit that couldn't return. 2 days after the failed ritual at Pura Dalimpatang, the village of Patang changed drastically. The sky stayed overcast despite the dry season. Farmers lost their crops because the soil felt cold. People suddenly fell ill, especially children and the elderly. Strange noises came from the old well, and the trees seemed to whisper at night. Jaramanku and Pak Nyoman knew they couldn't wait any longer. They had to find the root of the problem and finish it once and for all. During a meditation session, Jaramanku had a vision. He saw Edward's trapped spirit walking down a dark tunnel, calling out weakly, but behind him, a massive shadow with horns and a face like an ancient Balinese mask kept following. That entity was called Bhuta Kakarwala, a primeval spirit that misleads souls. Legend says it was once a guardian between the real world and the underworld, before being sealed by the ancestors through an ancient ritual. Edward's body was now becoming its new entry gate. They had to separate Edward's spirit from his body before Bhuta Kakarwala took full control on the third Galungan. Jero Manku and Paknyoman decided to perform the soul-crossing ceremony, a ritual so ancient it hadn't been done in decades. The ritual required 4 elements: blood of Balinese descent, soil from the cursed temple, fire from sacred incense, and water from a spring on Mount Agung. Gathering these wasn't easy. They had to journey to Mount Agung, to a spring that only appeared during the dark moon. During the journey, they were haunted by nightmares. Patnyoman saw his deceased child calling from within the mist. Jeromanku saw his younger self when he nearly abandoned the spiritual path. Whether tests or distractions, they were real, but they managed to return with the holy water. With all 4 elements in hand, they prepared for the final ritual. The night of the third Galungan arrived. The village was eerily quiet. No gamelan music, no dances, only soft prayers whispered from house to house. Villagers gathered, led by Patnyoman and Jeromanku. Once again, they had to return to Puradalam Patang, but none dared enter beyond the outer courtyard. Patnyoman and Jeromanku stepped into the temple, alone. Oil lamps were lit. Mantras were whispered, slow and steady. They sprinkled the cursed temple soil at the 4 corners of the inner sanctum. Holy water was dropped in the center. Then incense was lit, and a small drop of blood fell on the central stone. Suddenly, a strong wind swept through. The fire flared up high. From the darkness, Edward's body appeared, half human, half shadow. "Why have you returned?" his voice growled. "Edward, listen to me," said Panyoman. "We want to bring you home, but you must fight that creature." Edward's body trembled. His eyes flickered. Then his face turned into Bhuta Kakarwala. "Too late," it said. "His soul is mine now." Jeromanku didn't hesitate. He began chanting the soul separation mantra. The fire formed a circle around Edward. His scream echoed out of the temple. Patnyoman sprinkled holy water onto Edward's face. For a moment, the body froze. "Edward, remember your family. Remember your name," shouted Patnyoman. A voice from Edward's body whispered, "I am Edward." But Bhuta Kakarwala fought back. A massive shadow emerged from the body, clawing at the temple ceiling. The heat intensified. Stones began to crack. But Jeromanku pulled a small sacred dagger from his pouch. "This is an ancestral kriss. Only it can seal the gate." He stabbed the kriss into the ground at the center of the fire circle. A burst of light erupted. Edward's body was thrown back. Bhuta Kakarwala's scream split into 1,000 voices. Then, silence. Absolute silence. The fire extinguished. The wind stopped. Edward's body lay motionless. Paknyoman approached, holding his breath. Edward's finger twitched. His eyes opened slowly. "Where am I?" he asked weakly. Paknyoman immediately embraced him. "You've come back, my boy. You've come home." Jeromanku smiled faintly. But as they exited the temple, the sky was still gray. The wind remained cold, and faint gamelan sounds echoed. 3 days after the ceremony, Edward began to recover, but he remembered nothing. Every time they asked about the full moon night, he just shook his head. "I only remember light, then darkness." Jeromanku decided to keep everything a secret. He knew not all truths should be told, and not all gates should be opened. Edward quietly returned to his home country. No news, no stories. But every Galungan, a faint voice can still be heard near the temple, as if a soul still lingers or waits. Paknyoman remained the village guardian, but he never approached Puradalam Patang again. He knew the gate was closed, but that didn't mean safe, because in the spirit world, All it takes is one mistake to reopen a door, and anyone too curious might become the next key. So if you ever visit Bali and see an ancient temple deep in the forest, don't try to sleep there, even when the full moon looks beautiful, because sometime that beauty is bait from something that doesn't want to stay sealed. And once you open that door, there's no guarantee you'll return the same. Edward Malloy was lucky to come back, but his imprint remains between worlds, because a soul that once merged with darkness is never truly free. And that old temple is no longer just known for the foreigner's ghost, but as the place where man and demon once exchanged souls. The village of Patang still keeps its secrets. But now that you've heard this story, you know some truths are better left unexplored, and some spirits are not meant to be summoned. So if you hear a voice calling for help during Galungan, don't answer, don't search, don't approach, because it might not be human. It might be a voice from behind the gate, which once opened, will forever seek a new sacrifice.